Will you marry me?
Margaret sat alone at the wooden table, her cold coffee untouched. At 58, she knew when things weren't going well, and today was one of those days. She checked her phone again. 30 minutes late. David, her blind date from the dating website, wasn't coming. The cafe buzzed around her with young professionals and couples, making her feel invisible. She had worn her best blue dress, ironed carefully that morning, and now felt foolish sitting here alone. Margaret opened her wallet. $5. That was everything until payday in 3 days. She had already spent $3.50 on the coffee, not wanting to sit without ordering. Working as a hospice nurse didn't pay much, but Margaret had never done it for money. Sitting with people in their final days, holding their hands, listening to their stories, that was the most important work she could imagine. But it meant a paycheck that barely covered basics. This cafe was clearly expensive, with exposed brick walls and hanging lights. Everyone looked so polished while she sat in her simple dress and worn cardigan, feeling completely out of place. A man in a gray suit walked past, catching her eye briefly. He was in his early 30s, handsome and well-dressed. For a moment their eyes met, then he moved toward the back of the cafe. The waitress approached with kind eyes. "Can I get you anything else?" Margaret shook her head. "No, thank you. I was waiting for someone, but I don't think they're coming." "I'm sorry. Take your time. No rush," the waitress said gently. Margaret decided to wait 5 more minutes, then leave with whatever dignity remained. She had survived worse than a failed blind date, a divorce in her 50s, financial struggles, loneliness. She would survive this too. She thought about her patients who often shared their regrets at the end. So many wished they had been braver, taken more chances. And here she was, trying to be brave, and it still wasn't enough. The man in the gray suit returned, walking directly to her table. Margaret's heart skipped. Was she being asked to leave? "Excuse me, are you Margaret?" he asked kindly. "Yes, but I don't think we know each other," she replied, confused. "I'm Richard. I own this cafe. I noticed you've been waiting alone, and I overheard you tell my waitress someone isn't coming." He sat down carefully. "About 20 minutes ago, a man came in, looked around, saw you, and left without ordering anything." The words hit hard. David had come, seen her, and left. She must have looked crushed because Richard's face filled with concern. "I'm sorry to tell you that, but the problem is clearly with him, not you." Margaret tried to smile through tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you, but we both know that's not entirely true. I'm 58 with more gray than brown hair, and I spent my last $5 on coffee, hoping someone might see past all that." Richard was quiet, then said, "Do you know what I see? Someone who had courage to show up. Someone with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Someone who probably spends her time caring for others and little time on herself." The tears spilled over. "I don't usually fall apart in public. You're not falling apart. You're being human," Richard said. He signaled the waitress. "Sarah, please bring us whatever Margaret would like for lunch." "On my personal tab." "I couldn't possibly," Margaret protested. "Please, let me have lunch with you, if you'll allow it." "I'd genuinely like to." Margaret thought about her empty apartment, her quiet evening, about being brave. "I'd like that." "Thank you." Over the next hour they talked. Really talked. Richard had inherited the cafe from his uncle 2 years ago and wanted it to be more than a business, a community space where people felt welcomed. Margaret told him about hospice nursing, about the privilege of being with people in their final days, about her divorce, her daughter across the country, struggling financially while finding joy in small things. "Why nursing?" Richard asked. "Because everyone deserves someone there at the end. Everyone deserves to be seen to know they mattered," Margaret said simply. Richard nodded. "My uncle taught me something similar. He had a hospice nurse near the end. Her name was Patricia." Margaret's eyes widened. "Patricia Chen?" "She was my mentor. She taught me everything." "She made such a difference for my uncle," Richard said quietly. "After he died, I promised to run this place with that same attention to human dignity." They talked through lunch into the afternoon. Margaret showed him pictures of her grandchildren. Richard shared his challenges running the business alone. having no family left. Loneliness is hard at any age, Margaret observed. Yes, it is, Richard agreed. As sunset approached, Margaret checked her watch. I should go. I have a night shift at 7. At the door, Richard paused. Margaret, would you like to have dinner sometime? I haven't had a conversation this genuine in years. You remind me what real connection means. You know I'm 26 years older than you, Margaret said carefully. I'm not asking because I feel sorry for you. I'm asking because I want to know you better, Richard said simply. I'd like that very much, Margaret smiled. Over the following months, they met regularly. Coffee before her shifts, lunch on days off. Her co-workers noticed the change, the lightness in her step. 3 months later, during a park walk, Richard stopped. I'm falling in love with you. I know it's complicated, but when I'm with you, everything feels right. Margaret felt tears of joy. I love you too. I was just afraid to admit it. A year later, Richard closed the cafe early and filled it with candles and flowers. When Margaret arrived, he led her to their table, the same one where they first sat. 1 year ago, I watched you sit here alone and heartbroken, and something told me I needed to know your story, Richard said, kneeling down. Margaret, you've taught me about courage and kindness. Would you marry me? Yes, Margaret whispered through tears. Absolutely yes. They married quietly 6 months later at the cafe. Margaret continued her hospice work. Richard ran the cafe, but now they did it together. The cafe became known as a place where lonely people found connection, where seniors knew they could get free coffee and conversation. Richard and Margaret made sure of that. When people asked about finding love later in life, Margaret smiled and said, It found me when I was sitting with my last $5 feeling invisible. Love found me because I was brave enough to show up. Their story reminded people it's never too late. You're never too old to begin again. All you have to do is show up, be brave, and trust that someone is waiting to see exactly who you are. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories to listeners everywhere. Leave a comment sharing your own story of unexpected kindness or second chances. We'd love to hear from you.